Welcome back everybody, my name is Nick930 and today we're going to look at the top 10 best stealth action franchises. These are games that are built around sneaking past your enemy and using distractions as opposed to fighting them head on. We're going to rate these franchises based on their stealth gameplay, including the moves offered to players, the weapons, the gadgets, the level design, and the replayability that only the best stealth action games offer. While some of these franchises occasionally lean more towards the action side of things, we're going to base our decisions off the strongest entries in these franchises. Number 10, Far Cry. I bet you didn't expect to see a first-person action shooter game on this list, but Far Cry has made it a point to always feature strong stealth gameplay with every entry. Long-distance sniping, silenced weapons, and brutal takedowns all make an appearance in most entries in this franchise. And if that wasn't enough, you can use the environment to create opportunities and distractions, like releasing a bear from a cage or setting a nearby village on fire. Far Cry occasionally has some scripted high-intensity firefights, but a good majority of each game is spent sneaking through the tall foliage and stealthily taking down multiple enemies at once. Number 9, Alien Isolation. Here's another genre of game I bet you didn't expect to see on this list. Survival horror has taken a significantly different direction these past couple of years after the success of the popular Amnesia indie game. Rather than giving the players assault rifles and rocket launchers, stealth games nowadays strip you of all your weapons and force you to take a stealthy approach to help make your experience more realistic and horrifying. And Alien Isolation is the perfect example of this. In Alien Isolation, you're stuck on a giant space station with the famous xenomorph roaming the halls. The artificial intelligence used for this alien is unmatched in gaming and is incredibly unpredictable. It'll consistently be within hearing range, meaning any wrong move on your part could bring it sprinting straight to you for an instant death. This game's stealth is brutally unforgiving, and distractions need to be carefully thought through to avoid screwing yourself over. You can craft objects like noisemakers and flashbangs to help give yourself an opportunity to slip past, but often you'll be reduced to timing your movements carefully and sprinting only when you know you can get away. Alien Isolation is an excellent stealth action game and one of the best survival horror games I've ever played. Number 8, Tenchu. Tenchu is a third-person stealth action franchise that we haven't seen in recent years. While the franchise hasn't had the best reception overall, the game's stealth mechanics are some of the best in the genre, and also some of the most unique. In Tenchu, you play as a ninja and need to sneak through levels, stealthily taking out enemies along the way with cool gadgets like a blow dart, grappling hook, and even a snorkel you could use to hide underwater for extended periods of time. Your performance is rated at the end of each level, with the most stealthy players being awarded with the coveted Grand Master rating. The detection meter works similarly to the modern-day detection meter in video games, where the meter would fill up the more exposed you were to an enemy, and maxing out this meter would alert other nearby guards to your location. But you were never forced to stay in combat and could always hide long enough to force the guards to return to their patrols as if nothing happened. Number 7, Dishonored. Dishonored is the perfect example of a new age stealth action video game. The game's stealth is very simplistic in design, and levels are small and offer only a few options that are pretty blatantly obvious. The detection meter is present in this game, and while darkness does play a factor, it's also very simplistic, only indicating in binary whether or not the player is hidden in a dark enough spot to avoid being spotted. Sound design is also very simplistic, with basic noises like sprinting and firing your gun being the only real ways to alert enemies, and objects in the game world do not really have much of an impact. But what sets this game apart from other stealth action video games are the supernatural powers. In Dishonored, you can unlock upgrades to these special abilities that allow you to stop time, teleport, and even turn into rats or fish to help sneak into small vents in the building. These powers can be strung together to make some very creative approaches to objectives, and the entirety of both games can be played without ever killing a single enemy. Number 6, Deus Ex. Deus Ex is an RPG stealth action video game with the freedom to play however you like, similar to a few of the other entries already mentioned. The level design in Deus Ex is always top-notch and offer an exhausting amount of entry points, most of which are only accessible with specific abilities like the ability to lift a large vending machine away from a vent cover. This game can also be played without killing anybody, and the choices made throughout each game can greatly affect the outcomes and reception from other characters in the game world. Stealth is generally the best option in each situation and can be brutally difficult, especially with the very clunky control scheme that the game offers. Tripwire alarms, cameras, automated machine guns, and high-tech patrols are all obstacles that need to be overcome throughout the series, and these desperate need to loot hard-to-reach areas for necessary ammo and weapons only enforces the need for a stealthy approach. The first few games in the franchise had some very simplistic stealth, with enemies having incredibly low sight lines, making it easy to sneak by, and later games in the franchise offer so many enhancements through augmentation that you can eventually just turn invisible and walk past everybody without any consequences. but this game still manages to earn a top spot for its open-ended level design and freedom of choice. Number 5. Styx, Master of Shadows. Styx is one of the newer entries on this list and is a surprisingly well-made stealth action game. You play as a little goblin and need to sneak around this large tower filled with hostile orcs and other creatures, while also taking advantage of special powers like the ability to clone yourself and safely scout ahead. Styx features tons of great stealth takedown abilities like ledge takedowns and also requires the player to utilize shadows to sneak around. The shadows in Styx are about as simplistic as Dishonored, but this in combination with Styx's great movement and capabilities and unique powers all make for one of the most impressive stealth action games in a long time. Number 4. Thief. Thief is a first-person stealth action game that revolutionized the gaming industry. The original Thief is one of the first video games to offer a morally ambiguous set of choices that force the player to make decisions that they think are the right course of action as opposed to just being given options in black or white. In Thief, you would need to sneak around dark levels and loot guards without them seeing. Players were required to monitor lighting while also keeping track of how much sound they were making, something that would eventually go on to inspire other major stealth action franchises. Eventually, the franchise opened up and had much larger open-world level designs, but the most recent entry in the series fell flat in comparison to competitors like Dishonored. Still, the original 2 Thief games are arguably some of the most difficult and rewarding stealth action you can have in a video game. Number 3. Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear is the very first stealth action video game ever made. The original game was a top-down MSX computer game where you navigated between boxes and hallways with a secret agent named Solid Snake, and needed to rely on timing your movements with their cone of vision to avoid detection. This overly simplistic style of stealth gameplay would eventually evolve into one of the greatest stealth action franchises of all time. Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1 marked the first time that the series started using a third-person perspective, and the popular Shadow Moses level was the first time players really got a taste of the stealth action genre. Players could sneak around and climb into the back of trucks to hide, carefully avoid leaving footprints that could be tracked by enemy soldiers in the snow, crawl through small ventilation shafts, and of course, sneak around in cardboard boxes. The franchise continued to evolve throughout the years with impressive new mechanics like the ability to blend in with the environmental textures using specific camo patterns on the player's clothing. The most recent entry in the franchise, The Phantom Pain, featured the first time the series attempted an open-world design, and while the story was complete garbage when compared to the past entries, Metal Gear Solid 5 has some of the best stealth action ever put into a video game. Number 2. Hitman. Hitman is one of the most unique and creative examples of stealth on this list. Most of the titles on this list focus on hiding from the enemy and sneaking past them without being seen, whereas Hitman focuses on a different form of stealth, hiding in plain sight. In Hitman, the goal of each level generally involves needing to assassinate a target. Each game gives you several options to kill your target in creative ways. The most impressive mechanic in the Hitman franchise is the ability to disguise yourself as someone else. You can steal clothes from workers or soldiers in the levels and use them to walk straight past enemies to get closer to your target. Evidence also plays a major role in the Hitman franchise, and the player's ability to avoid leaving a trace is imperative to avoid raising suspicion. Later entries in the franchise would introduce the much-needed option to sneak around without disguises with some basic stealth mechanics like the ability to knock enemies out with a sleeper hold or the ability to climb pipes and ledges, and the detection meter also managed to find its way into later games. Some of the best stealth in the franchise comes from taking out enemies without ever utilizing a disguise, something that requires expert knowledge of the levels and enemy guard patrols along with great use of distractions and timing, making Hitman one of the penultimate stealth action video games. But before I reveal my top pick for best stealth action video game, here's a few of the other franchises that I considered. And my number 1 pick for best stealth action video game is Splinter Cell. Splinter Cell takes everything from all the best stealth action video games that preceded it and combines them for one of the deepest and most impressive stealth action franchises ever made. Players take the role of Sam Fisher, a member of a top secret program in the NSA called Splinter Cell. As a Splinter Cell, players will need to sneak behind enemy lines alone and carefully take advantage of everything in their surroundings to avoid detection. Splinter Cell games require that you monitor your speed to avoid making too much sound relative to the type of surfaces that you're standing on. Splinter Cell also requires that you be incredibly aware of lighting. Unlike the other entries on this list, Splinter Cell has an actual meter that measures the amount of photons hitting the player, and players will need to judge the amount of lighting and the distance to enemies to determine if they are hidden enough to avoid being detected. If players want to create more shadows, they can use their silenced weapons to destroy most light sources, or can even walk up and flip the switches to turn them off. Enemy AI will react to anything that seems out of place and will investigate things like lights being switched off or doors being left open, forcing players to carefully maneuver in insanely close quarters to avoid being detected. The early games in the franchise gave players all kinds of cool toys like lock picks to open doors, or the SC-20K assault rifle that could fire all kinds of awesome gadgets like a sticky camera that could be used to spy around corners. On top of this, the Splinter Cell franchise also offered the very first stealth-oriented multiplayer gameplay, pitting two stealthy spies that played in third person against two mercenaries armed with heavy assault rifles that were forced to play in first person. This asymmetric style of game was unprecedented at the time, and the only game even remotely similar to it was the Alien vs. Predator game from 2000. Splinter Cell also featured some of the most impressive graphics of its time, and features like water ripples and cloth simulation all played important roles in making the levels feel realistic and believable. The franchise hasn't been as strong as of late, with more of a focus on action than stealth, but the third entry in the franchise, Chaos Theory, still remains the absolute best stealth action video game ever made. And that's my list for best stealth action video games. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more top 10s posted every Monday.